Hey, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, Ryan, CNN, establishment Democrats, and neocons, they're taking up arms this weekend. Well, after the New York Times published a story Friday afternoon claiming that Russian intelligence officers have been secretly offering bounties to Taliban-linked militants in exchange for killing U.S. coalition forces in the country. The story alleges that the White House and the Trump administration have been aware of the intelligence since March and implied that the administration has done little to confront Russia in the country. Now, such a story seems designed to trigger Russiagators in the Democratic Party and the media, as it contains all of the ingredients for outrage. A president sucking up to Putin and appearing impotent while supposedly downplaying or whitewashing a threat to American service members. Now ask yourself, who exactly benefits from such a story being leaked to the press? And if your neocon detector is tingling, then you would be right to trust it. Now, first of all, I have no doubt that this story is true in some form. I've covered the Afghan war for the better part of this decade. The Russian and the Iranian governments have been funding and providing weapons to Taliban-backed militants for pretty much the entire time that we've been there. Anyone remotely familiar with the conflict knows this. Now, the question is, why is this information, which was supposedly briefed to the White House in March, coming out now? If you guess that it's because the Trump administration is in the midst of trying to sign a historic peace deal with the Taliban, well, you might just be right. The truth is that the war is bloody and it's horrific. Proxy conflicts in Afghanistan have been happening since the beginning of U.S. involvement there in the 1980s against the Soviets. You can read the story as Russia putting U.S. forces in danger, or you can read the situation as our government putting our soldiers in danger after nearly 20 years of war where pretty much nothing except the draining of hard-fought American blood and treasure has been wasted. Getting the hell out of Afghanistan precisely means not having to deal with all this proxy war bullshit any longer. But that has not stopped the media and Democrats from basically agitating, not just for more war in Afghanistan. Vice President Joe Biden has responded to the report with typical Russiagate framing. Let's take a listen.
Donald Trump has continued his embarrassing campaign of deference and debasing himself before Vladimir Putin. He has this information, according to the Times, and yet he offered to host Putin in the United States and sought to invite Russia to rejoin the G7. His entire presidency has been a gift to Putin, but this is beyond the pale. It's a betrayal of the most sacred duty we bear as a nation, to protect and equip our troops when we send them into harm's way.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi even outdid Biden, claiming that the only conceivable reason that Trump has not, quote, done something yet in response to the report is that the Russians must have something on him, showing that the Russiagate brainworms continue to run deep.
How would you explain his refusal to even to ignore again and again the intelligence that puts right at the Russian doorstep?
Even worse was a segment done by the Russiagate queen, Rachel Maddow.
If this Times report is correct, this means that U.S. intelligence has concluded that Vladimir Putin is offering bounties for the scalps of American soldiers in Afghanistan. Not only offering money to people who kill Americans, but some of the bounties that Putin has offered have been collected, meaning the Russians at least believe that their offering cash to kill Americans has actually worked to get some Americans killed. The Russians at least believe, if these bounties have been paid out, that the people to whom they have offered this money have successfully gone out and killed American soldiers because of it, and the Russians have therefore paid for that service. And President Trump was told about this in March, and he has done nothing about it.
So think about the logical conclusion of Biden, Pelosi, and Maddow's framing. Not only do they want U.S. soldiers to stay in Afghanistan, they want to ramp up a proxy war against Russia in that country. That is complete and sheer madness. We should want nothing of the sort except to make sure not one more American life dies for the failed experiments of neocon ideologues. And the best part is, you know who used to understand all this? Well, Vice President Joe Biden. One of the only things I've ever respected about his largely terrible record is that while he was vice president of the United States, he fought hard within the Obama administration to try and limit U.S. forces in the country. He argued against the Afghan surge in 2009 2009, and he long advocated for a counterterrorism mission in that country, a direct move away from nation building. Can we get that guy back? That guy understood. The longer and the larger the U.S. presence in Afghanistan gets, the more we get embroiled in conflicts that have no connection whatsoever to why we continue to fight there in the first place. Do not be fooled by this story and the reaction. It is a concerted effort by the national security bureaucracy and vested interests here in Washington to keep the United States in Afghanistan. It is a dual purpose to undermine the current administration's peace efforts, activate Republican neocons who will be asking tough questions about this for the foreseeable future, and remove any political breathing room possible to actually save American soldiers' lives by getting the hell out of that country. And Ryan, I mean, the way I was reading the story, it's like, you understand this as well, right? Which is like the national security bureaucracy knows how to selectively leak and weaponize something explicitly to push a political end. Because now you've got, when they say do something, what does that mean? I mean, are we supposed to fight Russians in Afghanistan? What is it, 1986? Like, it's madness.
Right. Presumably, the people who leaked it are probably the ones that you said, because they're the ones who have access to this, to this information. So exactly, what do they want? They want to prolong the conflict. So what's interesting is that if you want to talk about aligned interests, it's not necessarily Trump and Russia here. It's Russia who wants the United States dragged further into Afghanistan because they think it's terrible.
Which it is.
For us.
They can read a balance sheet and see how much we spend over there.
It's awful for us. And the neocons also want us dragged into Afghanistan because ideologically they support that project, and they always have. They've been arguing for it for decades. And so, the idea that in response to Russia engaging in this kind of assassination campaign of American troops, that you would respond by giving Russia precisely what it wants, only encourages them from doing it further.
Yes. No, exactly right. I mean, look, it's low footprint for. Look, I would personally love to see the Russians who paid these guys get sent home to Moscow in a body bag. But that's not how international politics works, right? Like, it makes my blood boil, the fact that they're doing this. But I'm not going to say that that means that we should go to war with Russia in Afghanistan, because that would be insane, which is that if you really care about American soldiers' lives, you need to understand that the national security bureaucracy and everybody else is doing everything they can to torpedo this peace deal with the Taliban. Because how many people are going to lose contracts, right, Ryan? How many people are going to lose the food contracts alone for U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan? Billions. The amount of gas that we give the Afghan National Army and petroleum that they just steal and sell on the black market. I mean, I can go all the way down the line. I've covered this for a long, long time. And immediately when I read this, I was like, two things. Like I said, no doubt that the story is true. There's no doubt. I mean, the Russians have been providing arms, Iranians, everybody. Anybody who hates America, why wouldn't you fund our soldiers? That's what they did in Iraq. That's what they did in Syria. But what you have to look at it and say is the American presence in Afghanistan so enduring that I am willing to put up with all this proxy war nonsense in order to keep it? And to the neocons, the answer is yes. But the really terrible part is Biden used to know better. I mean, I bet you I can find segments of Rachel Maddow trashing the Bush administration on Afghanistan. And yet now they're basically advocating for an all-out war in this country. I mean, I don't think they understand the implications of what they are saying, right?
Yeah. And if I remember right, I think that Maddow was actually willing to criticize Obama's surge in Afghanistan in 2009, which, if people remember, Obama's entire rationale for that was that he was going to show some strength so that he could then leave on a strong footing. He announced his withdrawal and his surge at the precise same time. And like you said, to Biden's credit, he said, "This is crazy. Why don't we actually just skip that whole part and get to the leaving," which would have, that was 11 years ago. And so now, Trump has been, running up against some significant forces who want, troops to stay there. And so every time that negotiations have gotten somewhere with the Taliban, you've seen things like this come up that try to disrupt them and try to say, well, look, there are people that just don't want to make peace with the Taliban.
Right.
And I can understand that impulse. Who wants to make peace with terrible people?
Yeah, they're bloodthirsty killers.
But,
okay.
But then the result is what we've had,
Yes,
which is
right.
20 years of war. We can't have another 20 years of war. One of the more delusional things I think that came out of this reporting was the idea from a lot of liberals on Twitter that Trump tweeted that white power video.
Oh, yeah, right.
In order to distract from this Russia story. And then they would say, oh, look, the Trump white power video is on the front of the New York Times and the Russia story has been pushed down. Big success for Donald Trump. It's like, what's wrong with
what is wrong with you?
people? Like, what's more damaging
Yeah.
to Donald Trump? A story about Russia and Afghanistan that is confusing, that a lot of people can't follow, and then reminds people of Russiagate, and they're kind of tired of that, or Trump celebrating white power. Like, come on, that kills him.
He retweeted a stupid video.
And I actually think he watched it with the sound off.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
He's an irresponsible clown.
Right.
He saw some guy in a Veterans for Trump thing and just retweeted. I don't think.
Right.
But then he stands by it because he can't.
But then he deleted it, apparently.
Oh, did he delete it later? I thought he might eventually.
Or what I'm saying is,
one.
no, you're exactly right, which is that is the brain worm. I mean, look at Pelosi. Oh, they must have something on him. Otherwise, he would do something. What does do something look like? Everybody needs to understand. Do something is a very specific DC term to the think tank class. That means targeted strikes. That means we start paying guys in Afghanistan to kill Russians. Anybody want to get? I don't want that. And no American voter. They have voted 3 separate presidential elections to get out of Afghanistan. And every single time they have been shafted because these people are so powerful that they can just create, they can remove all of the breathing room to actually try and get any sort of peace deal. And this is the end result, which is that at the end of Donald Trump's presidency, either now or in 4 years, I doubt that we will have any enduring peace in Afghanistan. Not just because of them, but because of how powerful that the national security bureaucracy is.
And the other do something is throw another round of sanctions on a couple of oligarchs and seize some Russian property. That doesn't bring those American lives back either, and it doesn't dissuade them from doing it again.
Exactly.
In the future, if they get what they actually wanted, which is more.
They get what they want, which is U.S. troops in Afghanistan. So congratulations, everybody. All right, Ryan is going to share his thoughts on the uprising against Marty Barron at the Washington Post when Rising continues.